Man is condemned to be free. That short but weighty line comes from Jean-Paul Sartre, and it captures something very relevant to our question today. Is atheism in itself a belief system? At first glance, it seems like a simple yes or no question. Some argue that atheism must be a belief because it involves holding a position about the existence of gods. Others argue that it isn't a belief at all, but rather the absence of one. But the more we look closely, the more we realize how layered the question is. It touches philosophy, psychology, sociology, and even politics. And when we peel back the layers, what we discover is that labeling atheism as a belief system tells us more about the psychology of belief itself than it does about those who simply don't accept religious claims. The first thing to recognize is that belief systems, as we usually define them, tend to have a structure. They contain doctrines, moral rules, rituals, authorities, and promises. Religion is the most obvious example. Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, each comes with sacred texts, prescribed behaviors, and a community that reinforces its worldview. These elements provide a framework that defines what is true, what is good, and how one should live. Now, contrast this with atheism. Atheism doesn't come with a sacred book. It doesn't prescribe rituals, and it doesn't set out a universal moral code. It doesn't tell people what political system they must support, what food they must eat, or what they must do on holy days. To call atheism a belief system in the same sense as religion is misleading, because it lacks those institutional and prescriptive elements. This doesn't mean atheists don't hold beliefs. Everyone does. Humans couldn't function without them. We believe that other people have minds like our own. We believe that the sun will rise tomorrow based on patterns we've observed. We believe in scientific theories, not as dogma, but as the best explanations available so far. Belief in this general sense is unavoidable, but those kinds of beliefs are not the same as a belief system. They are not tied together in an organized narrative that seeks to explain the universe through unquestionable authority. This distinction matters because critics often try to paint atheism as just another religion. They say, well, you don't believe in God, but you believe in science, or you believe in reason. So that's just your faith. But science isn't faith in the religious sense. It's trust in a method, not in a conclusion. If evidence changes, scientific belief changes with it. That flexibility is the opposite of what we usually mean by faith, which insists on holding a position regardless of contradictory evidence. Psychologically, there's another layer worth exploring. Humans are naturally meaning-seeking creatures. We don't like empty spaces in our worldview. Religion has historically filled that space by offering a complete package of meaning and morality. When someone leaves religion, outsiders often assume they must have adopted a new package to replace the old one. This is why many people struggle to understand atheism. They expect it to look like a competing church with its own doctrines and commandments. When they don't see that, they call atheism hollow. Or worse, they try to force it into the mold of a belief system. But perhaps the more accurate way to understand atheism is as a release from that framework altogether. It's not a competing belief system. It's a refusal to accept one particular claim, that gods exist. From there, individuals are free to form their own beliefs about morality, politics, science, and life based on reason, evidence, and experience. That diversity is why you'll never find a single atheist worldview. There are humanists, secular Buddhists, political liberals, conservatives, libertarians, and everything in between who happen not to believe in gods. Sociology gives us even more insight. Studies of non-religious populations show that atheists don't cluster into a unified culture with shared dogmas. Instead, they spread across societies, sometimes quietly, sometimes outspokenly, but without central leadership. Compare that to organized religions, where hierarchical structures dictate the beliefs of millions. The absence of hierarchy in atheism highlights again why calling it a belief system misses the mark. Another point that gets overlooked is the role of doubt. Religious belief systems usually treat doubt as a threat, something to be overcome through prayer, study, or obedience. But for someone without religious belief, doubt isn't something to be cured. It's a normal, even healthy part of thinking. Questioning assumptions, changing one's mind, and holding uncertainty are not signs of weakness. They're signs of intellectual honesty. In this sense, the mindset often associated with atheism values doubt as a tool, not as a danger. Real-world examples help here. Take the case of Denmark and Sweden, often ranked among the least religious countries in the world. These societies are not organized around atheism. They don't have atheist churches issuing decrees about what citizens must believe. Instead, they function on secular principles, laws built on human rights, policies guided by evidence, and a general cultural acceptance that people can live moral lives without supernatural oversight. Their social systems don't rely on religion, but neither do they rely on atheism as a formal doctrine. What they show us is that life without religion doesn't require a substitute belief system at all. On the flip side, when movements have tried to turn non-belief into something resembling a religion, the results have been awkward at best. Attempts to form atheist churches or rituals often struggle, because the participants themselves recognize that they don't need the trappings of organized belief. Community can be valuable, of course, but community doesn't require dogma. You can share meals, raise children, and support each other through crises without invoking divine authority or constructing a creed around non-belief. There's also a deeper philosophical question. What is the burden of proof? In most areas of life, the burden lies on the person making a claim. If someone says they have a dragon in their garage, it's up to them to provide evidence, not up to you to disprove it. Atheism fits this model. It doesn't claim certainty that no gods could exist in any form. Rather, it withholds belief until adequate evidence is provided. That's not a belief system. It's simply applying the same standard we apply everywhere else in life. One of the more under-discussed aspects is how language shapes this debate. Words like belief and faith carry baggage. When someone says atheism is a belief, they often mean it rhetorically, to level the playing field. Your unbelief is just as much faith as my belief. But this rhetorical move hides an important asymmetry. Believing without evidence and withholding belief until evidence appears are not the same thing. Lumping them together under the same word blurs the distinction between conviction without proof and skepticism that awaits proof. Another overlooked angle is how atheism interacts with morality. Critics often ask, "Without God, what do you believe in? What guides your ethics?" The assumption here is that morality requires a divine lawgiver. But moral philosophy has long shown that ethics can be grounded in empathy, social contracts, and rational analysis of human well-being. You don't need a cosmic overseer to understand that suffering is bad and kindness is good. In fact, secular approaches to morality often hold up better under scrutiny because they rely on principles that can be explained, debated, and revised, rather than decrees handed down from authority. Consider how human rights were expanded in history. The abolition of slavery, the fight for women's rights, the recognition of LGBTQ equality. These shifts didn't come from blind adherence to sacred texts. In many cases, they came from challenging those texts and appealing instead to reason and human dignity. That doesn't mean religion never played a role in reform, but it does highlight that progress often required stepping outside rigid belief systems. Atheism, in freeing people from those boundaries, allows ethics to evolve with knowledge and compassion. Of course, critics sometimes warn that without religion, societies risk moral collapse. Yet, again, empirical evidence doesn't back this up. Highly secular countries regularly score higher on measures like happiness, equality, education, and crime reduction. The correlation isn't perfect, but it's consistent enough to show that religion is not the necessary glue some claim it to be. Atheism, far from being a dangerous belief system, often accompanies flourishing societies. So, is atheism a belief system? The evidence suggests it isn't. It's better understood as a stance, an absence of belief in gods, and nothing more. From that starting point, people go on to form beliefs about science, ethics, and politics, but those are not dictated by atheism itself. They're dictated by human reasoning, culture, and personal reflection. Labeling atheism as a belief system flattens these distinctions. It treats skepticism as if it were faith, and absence as if it were presence. But the truth is simpler. Atheism is not a competing religion, not a creed, not a system. It's an open space in which individuals can construct their own frameworks, guided by evidence, experience, and the freedom that comes from refusing to accept claims without justification. And maybe that's the most unsettling part for those who try to dismiss atheism. It reveals that belief systems are not inevitable. Humans can live without them. We can shape meaning not through obedience to invisible authority, but through our own shared humanity.